Hey everyone, it's the Eclectic Dev. Today we're going to put our AI hats back on and take a look at GitHub Copilot in a Blazor application using Visual Studio. Let's check it out. So a quick overview on GitHub Copilot as a tool. What we're talking about here is a generative AI tool that's going to assist us with coding within our IDE. And there are multiple supported IDEs from Visual Studio Code, the IntelliJ, NeoVim. There's a whole bunch of them. Today, the focus will be on Visual Studio. And to understand what this is offering for us, this is that next evolution in software engineering and software development. As much as from going from books to the internet or from Notepad to sophisticated IDEs ramped up our productivity, these tools will do the same for us as well. And that's what we're going to highlight today. The one prerequisite is that you do have a GitHub Copilot license, either individual, business, or enterprise, ready and loaded, and we can get going. To test out GitHub Copilot, we're going to use one of my open source applications. This is the Engine Analytics web app. What it is, it's a .NET 8 Blazor WebAssembly standalone application. And if you take a quick look at it, we can enter some data and metrics about automobile engines. It'll do some basic calculations. It has some outputting on the reports. There's an API to look up weather at different locations. So this will be the backdrop of the application that we're using. Now, inside of Visual Studio, we need to get GitHub Copilot set up. And to begin with that, we can install the extensions. So if you go to the extensions menu and manage extensions, we can go to the online Visual Studio Marketplace and look at Copilot. And what that will do is bring up the extensions that we need. The two that we need are GitHub Copilot and GitHub Copilot Chat. Once both of those are installed, you will see them in your menu as installed. I do have both already, and then we can proceed on to the next step, which is to authenticate to GitHub. Now, the way that I've done that already is up here in the Visual Studio toward the top right, my icon, I have already authenticated with GitHub. So that has set me up now so that if I look in the bottom left near the font size, we have the GitHub Copilot icon, indicating to us that we are ready to use the tooling. Now, there are some quick configurations in here about whether it's enabled and which parts, also triggering Copilot and Copilot Chat, learning about it. We'll look at some of the keyboard shortcuts here in a minute. The next thing, if you need it, you can go to the Tools menu and to Options. If you search for Copilot here, you will see under the GitHub menu that we have options for Copilot that you can toggle and Copilot Chat. There are default options, or you can select additional features as needed. You can have a look at those and see what's correct for your environment, but you can start with just the default and get moving along. All right, when talking about GitHub Copilot, under that umbrella, there are two main features: GitHub Copilot Inline and GitHub Copilot Chat. Inline is going to be directly in your file while you're coding. We can prompt it through commenting. We'll be able to see suggestions and alternative suggestions. We're going to look at a sample of that here in just a moment. Then GitHub Copilot Chat will be off in a separate window where we can query for additional detail. We'll look at several examples of that. It's much more interactive, but we can also bring up Copilot Chat directly inline as well, and I'll show you how to do that within the code. All right, let's go ahead and look at an inline example. I'm here in the horsepower data grid Razor component file within Blazor, and on this onInitialized async, typical lifecycle method, we're calling on an injected service to get automobiles. Now, what I can do is immediately following, maybe I need to manipulate this data. So I can provide a comment and then I can prompt it for what I need. This is known as part of the prompt engineering and how we inquire to GitHub Copilot exactly what we want it to do. So here I'm going to say sort the automobile data by year. And notice I didn't even spell it correctly. Now let's see what it ends up giving us. And almost immediately it shows me automobile data, order by the year, and putting it to list. This is fantastic. I just very little typing and I got that. Now, what if I don't like that solution? I want to see something else. Well, you can do that. Now, I'm on a PC, again, Windows, and this inside of Visual Studio, so my keyboard shortcuts might be different. But on mine, if I press Control Alt Enter, I will get this additional window with other solutions. So here it has two different solutions that it's offering me up, in one order by descending or order by depending on how I like it. So yeah, maybe I do want the order by descending. I can click accept solution and away it goes. Now we have that code and I've had to do very little. I didn't have to break my flow, go out to Stack Overflow, Google it, look at another file to remember what that code was like. I can move very quickly by creating the code that I need. Let's say I need to do something additionally, maybe some additional filtering from older cars that I don't want in there. So now I can say, remove any cars that are older than 1965. So I need to filter that out. So now it's saying automobile data where year is greater than 65 is what's going to be retained. And I do like that. And notice that I said remove any cars. I didn't say by year, and I said older than 1965. It understands that context. This is one of the incredible things about GitHub Copilot. So it knew that that would be the year property. That's exactly what I could need. I can tab on it, or I could have looked at additional suggestions. Again, how to get to that. If I back that out and hit enter, it gives me something. I can get Control Alt Enter, go over to this and see additional suggestions. In this case, greater than or equal to 1965. Maybe that's what I needed. Now, one of the things I must say as I accept one of these solutions, I will accept greater than 1965. Always verify and validate the code that Copilot generates for you. You do not want to always take it verbatim. You do want to assess that code, make sure it's exactly what you need. Obviously, you'll be testing it later and make sure that it's exactly what you want. You don't just want to rip through, never verifying what it is offered to you. So that is still a pertinent step. All right, let's take a look at one more inline Copilot example that's a little more complex. So I'm inside the engine calculation service, and this is injected into the main web app, and it offers those lower level calculations that are needed to show in the different various screens. So I've got currently right now to calculate engine horsepower, displacement, and torque. But what if I want to calculate some other metric, like the stroke? This is another value within an engine. So I can create a comment and I can say, create a function to calculate engine stroke and hit enter. So this time we're not doing simple sorting and filtering. We are actually creating an entire method. Now, taking a look at it, and I haven't accepted it yet. That's what that gray color is. It's got math.round on the crankshaft stroke length times 2. So I would need to verify it independently, the formula. But again, I can also look at alternative solutions. So I'm going to hit Control Enter. And this is not going to be something you do every single time. I just want to show you that this feature is available. So we can see, based on what's being passed in, which one of these that I want. Now, assuming that I have the formula correct, I could pick the one that I want. I could say accept solution. Maybe it's one of these other ones, and away we go. Now, I do expect in this case that stroke is not defined because I know on engine analytics right now, which is a type, I know that this does not actually have that property defined exactly like that. But in essence, I was able to prompt it to create a function for me, brand new, and this is even more robust than just simple one-liners like that. So this is demonstrating again how we can leverage the inline capabilities. All right, let's jump over to the actual Razor file itself and see how it will work in here. We know we can have a comment in Razor files using the ** syntax. So let's add in that syntax and let's give it something that we want to do. Maybe we want to add a button. So I'm going to say add a new row with a button to save the data. I'm going to hit enter, and what do you know? Copilot is helping us out even in the HTML code. So it shows me right here, it's going to add a new row with a column. And I can also do the same thing and look at additional solutions here and take a look at what it's going to offer me. And so I can see, you know, with on click, I can evaluate some of these. So we've got on click, save data, take the auto in here. We can see call span. We can see some of these different offerings. I want to go ahead. In this case, I'm going to accept this one right here, and it puts it in there with the code. Again, I'll check that out and make sure that I added the save data method within the Razor C# file itself, which I do not currently have. I could add that in, and I could use Copilot to help me with that as well. Let's go ahead and take a look at Copilot Chat right now to see how that could assist us as well with additional functionality within our Blazor application. All right, everything that we've seen thus far with GitHub Copilot Inline gets even better with Copilot Chat. Now, before we get into some examples, I want to show you how to get at it inside of Visual Studio. So if we zoom in here, next to Solution Explorer is the GitHub Copilot Chat tab. We can click on it, and that's how we can interact, ask questions, and we'll look at several examples there. But I also wanted to show you some of the keyboard shortcuts so you don't have to manually toggle between Solution Explorer and Copilot Chat. So what you can do, again, on a Windows PC in Visual Studio, my keyboard shortcut for that is Control/C. That brings up Copilot Chat. And then you probably want to get back to Solution Explorer. So if you didn't know, that's Control-Alt-L, and that will take me back to Solution Explorer. Now, by the way, one of the ways that you can find out some of these shortcuts is by looking at any of the menus inside of Visual Studio and seeing what's available. So for example, Copilot Chat, I could see right here, this is how I figured out what that keystroke was. That was not a manual mapping. So you can figure out how to toggle and use these things quickly, or you can just manually navigate to them. There's also the ability inline to actually have the Copilot Chat prompt as well. So at any place in your code, if you hit Alt/, that will bring up GitHub Copilot Chat. So this isn't the inline functionality, this is Copilot Chat. So we can interact here without having to go over to that side navigation pane. So let's look at a few examples. All right, so in the first example, I want to take a look at this line of code right here in this horsepower calculation Razor component file. I have this if statement on handle valid submit that's a little bit robust, checking multiple properties to see if they're not null. So I'm going to highlight that line just to give it context. Again, that's part of prompt engineering. I want to focus in on that line. And I'm going to come over here to Copilot Chat. I'm just going to ask it how to make the selected line more concise. And let's see what it ends up telling us. So it says you can make the selected line more concise by using the null condition operator in C#. And then it gives an explanation of what that is and what that code would look like. So we can see right here that it is more concise, being able to check those. So it doesn't have to check the horsepower instance itself. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that line, or I could preview it in place. And let's go ahead and replace it. And there we have our updated line. I also could have done that inline, having queried it as well through the inline Copilot Chat. And I could ask something similarly, anything that I need. So let's look at an example like that. So maybe here now, I want to take the handle valid submit. I'm going to hit that inline Copilot Chat, and I'm just going to say refactor this into multiple methods. I want to see what it ends up coming up with and what that might look like. Maybe it's going to parse out some of the different if statements. So let's see what it ends up looking like. All right, so it indeed has done that. So we can see on the right, it has said if is valid input rather than having that logic directly in the if statement, which I do like. So down in the is valid input, we've isolated that. And that's also nice for testing. And it's also isolated this calculate and save engine horsepower into its own method, and then called that asynchronously to clean up. I definitely do like this suggestion, so we could take it and then we could see if we need to do anything additionally, because sometimes when you accept these changes, there's additional updates that you'll need to make. It's not always pristine, but in this case it is. I do like the refactoring, and so there are two examples of how we can use Copilot Chat to improve upon our code. Let's look at some more things that we can do in the Copilot Chat window itself. All right, GitHub Copilot Chat has what are known as slash commands. They offer these concise shortcuts to yield productive measures that we don't have to fully explain and can help us generate code, explain code, and many other operations. So let's take a look at them. The easiest way to find out how they work is to type in /help into the Copilot Chat window. When you enter that in, you will get a list of what those are. Let's take a look at them. So we have /explain, explain the code. We'll look at several examples. This is really an incredible feature, not just to generate code, but to explain individual files, groups of files, methods, and really robust explanations that would otherwise take a great amount of time, either through documentation or knowledge transfer, through working with multiple people, reverse engineering through unit tests, or looking at code. This really gets us off the blocks well. /tests, one of the crown jewels of GitHub Copilot Chat, being able to generate unit tests off of a single method identified, an entire file or groups of files, or whatever that you end up needing. We can generate new unit tests for ourselves. /doc, which allows you to create documentation for a given method or parts of code. /fix, to be able to fix code, whether you have red squigglies right here in code or you're debugging code. Copilot can offer insight into what that error is. /optimize, optimize a group of code, whether that's for performance or refactoring. And then of course we've already looked at /help. So let's take a look at a few of those examples. All right, the first example that I want to show is the ability to explain code. So maybe I'll take a block of code. It could be anything, and I don't particularly understand it. So I'll take this use current geolocation. I'll go ahead and bring up the inline Copilot Chat and say /explain. So right here, it's going to take a look at this code, and it immediately explains what this code's doing. The selected code's a method, and it will tell me it's asynchronous by the async inside the method. It tells me what's being declared. It tells me what's happening within it. Overall, this retrieves the current geolocation coordinates and the latitude and longitude if they are available. If not, it displays a message indicating the failure. So that's pretty fantastic. I can use it at the method level. I could use it at the line level. How about at the file level? So if I come over here to Copilot Chat, I can say /explain, and you can reference whatever files you want. It'll either use the context of the code that you have in focus, or in Visual Studio, you can use hashtag and then the name of the file. So in this case, I want to use this file. Maybe I don't know what the file does in its entirety. So I can say /explain on this, and then it begins to give an in-depth explanation. Take a look at this. It's talking about it being a C# class for a Blazor component. It goes on to talking about what part of the application, which fields and properties, the lifecycle methods, that has JavaScript interop in this particular one. Just think about this. I mean, it's like a mini blog post on it, essentially telling you what exactly this file does. And that's pretty incredible because, again, in order to come up with that from scratch, whether there's documentation or any, or the KT on it from somebody else, it's pretty great that we can have that at our fingertips. Let's take a look at another language and see if it can explain as well. So we're just going to highlight this, and we're going to get some inline, and we'll do, once again, we'll say /explain. Maybe I'm not sure what the source is doing or what fields it has on it. So it talks about it being Razor syntax, what are the rows, what elements are within it, talking about the different attributes. I mean, just look at this in-depth explanation that it's given here. So it's talking about the User interface component for weather location with a search bar for entering a zip code and a button using the current geolocation. That's fantastic to be able to reverse engineer that and see that instantaneously with Copilot Chat. How about unit testing? Now, as I mentioned, this is the crown jewel. So I can go over to a file, let's say the weather service file, and currently it doesn't have any unit tests associated with it. Now I can test at a method level by highlighting a method, and I can say /test, or we can do it to the entire file. So I'm going to go to Copilot Chat over here in the window. We're going to say /test, and let's see what it ends up generating. Now I can give it additional context if needed. What mocking framework, it'll already know in context if it's in the application. But if there's any specifics, it goes back to that prompt engineering with Copilot Chat, that you are giving it the specifics so that it tailors the solution for what exactly you are looking for. So it's begun to generate the unit tests for us, and it's using mock and XUnit. Of course, again, we could specify what we needed. You can see that it's building out individual unit tests as soon as it's done generating here. I want to go ahead and inspect those a little bit more in depth. So we've got the new file set up here called weather service test with this class. It's got the correct setup with it being a fact, a range act, assert. It's got explanations of the names like set weather zip code underscore with null zip code underscore sets default zip code. So it's got those descriptive names on them. You could, again, if you had a style already in your application, you could provide it context and it would do those in line. But since it has nothing to go off of, this is what it's creating for me. And so down here also, it tells which scenarios it's covering. I could say here, insert into a new file. That would open up a new file. Now, at the time I go to save this, it's going to ask me which project I would like to associate that with. Also, as I had mentioned, I could easily go into a file or say this one. I could do the same thing. I could hit Alt/, bring up Copilot Chat Inline, say /test, have it generate this for me as well, and see what it's going to come up with for this particular method. Where this would be very helpful is, say you had a code coverage report and you were lacking some code coverage, you could go method by method that you were still in the red, get the unit test for it, insert it into the file, and then hopefully get a quality test for that code coverage. So let's see what it generates here. All right, it has opened up a new file already, weather service tests, and it has built up similarly everything that's needed for those particular tests and has done it in multiple different ways to test that method. So you're not just getting a single test, but you're getting multiple tests for the different conditions that it sees fit. So you're getting that from a lot of different ways. You could accept it here or hit cancel, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit cancel, but you can see the power in this to generate unit tests so quickly, even if it's just a catalyst to get you off the blocks and get some of the tests going. You can validate what's in there. You do need to verify it, no pun intended. Make sure that it is a quality test, and then go ahead and accept that and put it into your code. Okay, two more remaining features in Copilot Chat that I'd like to show are the optimize and fix / commands. So let's take a look at this method back here in this calculation razor component. I'm just going to highlight it and then go ahead and try out /optimize on it. Now, this is like a refactoring inquiry on it. Now, this may not have any real sensitive performance issues with it, but I would like to see how it could improve upon it. And so it's talked about what it's done to the actual code here. And so just to highlight some of them, it's changed the return type from void to a task to make it asynchronous. It's talked about which methods it's refactored and other modifications that it's made here in order to make this code more performant. Obviously, if you have like nested loops or anything of that nature, this is where this could be really helpful. All right, let's also take a look at fixing code that we have an issue with. So hopping over here to the weather location razor, let's say just for example's sake that I had just created this method, but I was really unaware of what I was doing. It's an async method, and Visual Studio is giving me a lot of red squigglies on it. Well, what I can do is, again, highlight that code, and then I can say /fix. And on that, Copilot is going to recommend to me what needs to happen with that code in order to fix it. Now, in this instance, it's shown me exactly what I need to do in order to fix this code, which is to add in those awaits. I also want to show you what happens if I go over to this Copilot chat window and do the exact same thing. One of the things I do like about this, it'll give an additional explanation about the code that it's modifying. So it tells me what the corrected version is, and then it tells me what was fixed and what the problem was. So you don't just get the code, you can learn about the code at the same time. So not only is this a /fix, it's kind of like explanation as well that we were looking at before. And so there's several ways that you can get to it. You can also do this while you're debugging code and leverage Copilot to give you insight into that as well. One final way that you can get at that error is you could always right click where it is and just say ask Copilot about it. This will bring up that same inline chat as well. And then we could ask, you could even say, what's the matter with this code, and then see what it ends up saying as well. Now that's kind of longhand, but that's where I wanted to show you with the / commands. To fix this issue, you should add the await keyword. It tells me what the problem is right here. And then by adding it, so it also gives that explanation. I like that as well. All right, this was a great look at using GitHub Copilot in a Blazor application inside of Visual Studio. Just remember, many of the mechanics, principles, and shortcuts I showed today can be used on other languages and IDEs, so make sure to try it out yourself and see how it works for you. Hopefully you found this helpful. Give it a thumbs up, check out the other videos on the channel, and until next time, this is the Eclectic Dev. We'll see you later.